One of the questions that was asked on the comment section of my very first video was, do I have a strategy slash approach for designing skill trees? The author was about to make their own for their own game. They're thinking about doing something like Diablo 2, and they were interested in hearing what other approaches there might be. So after giving it some thought, for me, whenever I start designing a feature for a game, especially something as big as a skill tree, I sort of try and take a step back and ask myself, what is the goal? Why even have a skill tree in the game? What's the purpose of it? And I start asking myself, and this might sound a bit janky, but what is the philosophy behind the skill tree for my game? For example, in Diablo 2, the philosophy behind the skill tree or the game, the goal of it was to provide players with a variety of different ways to customize their kit for their character. In some games, it's about just unlocking skills and providing them with a way to progress over time and feel like they're getting more powerful and more powerful and more powerful. In others, it's about deep and rich customization of every single possible stat. You probably know what I'm talking about. It's Path of Exile. But the philosophy behind each one and how they're approached is slightly different. Is it about providing a way to play off each other? Is it a way of creating potential symmetry? Beyond that, another question to ask is, what is your design pie of systems look like, and how overall complex is it? By design pie, I mean every game, if you imagine a pie chart, the systems in the game make up different components of that pie chart, and they take up different amounts of the player's attention. For example, in a game like Path of Exile, items take up a very large portion of the pie chart because they integrate so closely to the player's decision making. They basically are the build. A lot of them, they inform a lot of the abilities that you use. So when it comes to the skill tree, how much of that pie chart do you want players focused on? How much of the system space do you want to be taken up by the skill tree? This is important because it also then can inform the effort that you put into it from like a time perspective, or a thought perspective. How much time do you really want to spend working on this skill tree? If it is just a slither and it really is there just to give something that players, an item, like something, an action to do whenever they level up, well, then you probably don't need to spend too much effort on it. After that, I'd probably want to start thinking about what it is that I would want on the skill tree. By this point, I have a decent understanding of the goal. What is the behavior that I want the player to act in? Like, how do I want them to interact with it? Do I want them to have lots of conflicted choices when it comes to the skill tree? When they go to the skill tree, are they able to respec? That should probably have been identified in the philosophical component. Like, is this a game where you want players to re-roll a lot? If so, then the goal of the skill tree should be to lock players in to a certain build, to force them down a certain path, and to make them want to respec or restart the game in order to have to respec. So now you're at a situation where you need to identify what actually goes onto the skill tree. So are they abilities? Are they simple stat upgrades? If your skill tree is about big, massive moments, then I would suggest something more like the God of War style skill tree, where everything is a major ability, where there aren't just small little token upgrades or stat upgrades that you get to choose, like in Path of Exile, but everything is about unlocking a massive new skill. And hopefully you have enough of your game figured out that you can identify what those skills are and where you can plug them in. After that, it's probably something around how do you want it laid out? Like, what sort of progression do you want the player to have? Are they unlocking this every time they level up? If so, how often do they level up? What sort of cadence of rewards do you want to give the player? Is it by, do they unlock these things by finding items in the world, or do they unlock them by just earning experience? That unlock feeds back into the philosophy again. I know I keep on harping on this, but this is actually why starting with that goal is actually really important. And then finally, I would implement like a really rough version of it and then iterate, play the crap out of the game, try it again and again and again, and play it a lot and iterate on it. You might have to play fast speed if you're a big game like Diablo, but you know, like play it really quickly and try and get a feel for what it feels like to unlock it. Is it achieving the goals that you set at the beginning? If you wanted to have a lot of, playing off of each other of the skills, is that happening? Right? Like if you wanted it to be dynamic and something which changes every time, kind of like this little game called Talented, well, is it achieving that when you actually play it? At this point, be willing to throw out what you've done. That's a big part that I think that indie developers don't maybe think about enough or plan for enough. When you build these systems, the first time you build it is probably not going to be the last. You'll probably want to actually be able to iterate on these things. So being willing to throw it out and start again and giving yourself the allocated time to be able to do that, I think is really valuable. I think that's actually how you get to quality, is through iteration. I've never seen a system go in or a mission be built that actually is perfect the first time through. Those things typically either get iterated on in their existing construct so that you spend a lot more time polishing over time, or they get thrown out completely and started over from scratch. And that's how you get to quality. It's very rare that the first time you build something will be the last time you build something, if you want to actually have achieved the goal or be happy with it. So I hope that helps. I hope you find that valuable. Thanks for hanging out with me while I get to rant a bit, and I'll talk to you again next time.